A very good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me here. My sincere appreciation to your university, the Hazard Literacy Center, for inviting me, and it's an honor and privilege to be here. Um, After excellent presentation with so much of diversity, it's a challenge actually to talk up something new. But let me see how much I can actually do a justice to this keynote lecture. Um, if you see my affiliation, there are quite a bit of numbers of different affiliations. It's written. My main affiliation is with KO University, where I teach. But several other visiting professors positions in different other universities. So, of course, academia is my main foothold, but I also work very closely with the science policy interface with the UN, United Nations, as well as IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So I try to look at both the climate change and disaster science and policy interface. I established a couple of small startups which are based in India. And there I try to learn from the young professionals, young minds, on the new innovation in disasters and climate change. But I always say that my main learning so far has been from the people and community, from the grassroots. And I established this NGO. It's a Japanese NGO called Seeds Asia almost 20 years back. It's based in Kobe in Japan, and which was hit by a major earthquake in 1995. This year is the 30 years from that particular earthquake. And we often say that this 1995 Kobe earthquake is possibly one of the turning point of disaster risk reduction approaches, not only in Japan, possibly globally. So with that, my today's talk will be on this four or five specific topic. A little bit on this positioning the global risk landscape and how this whole complex risk landscape is evolving. Then I will talk on three types of education: disaster, climate change, and education for sustainable development, and try to see the commonalities and some postscript. And we have a couple of books related to this particular topic. You can actually also Google my name and this particular topic. Possibly you will be able to see some of the books there. Has anyone is aware about this particular report which is published by World Economic Forum called Global Risk Outlook? Anybody in the room? If not, I strongly encourage you to Google it. It's an annual report just published before the Davos meeting, which is held in Davos, Switzerland in January, usually in the third week of January every year. And it started in 2007 after all these Lehman shocks and when we saw lots of global turmoil in the economic issues globally. So, of course, it's World Economic Forum. The name itself says that it is focusing on the economic risk. And you will be seeing that like over years. So when I say 2020 report, so this is an analysis of different types of risk in the previous year, so 2019. And you will see many color coding. So the blue colors are the economic risk. The green one are the environmental risk, and there are some other colors like the geopolitical risk, the technological risks, and so on. So if you see on the previous year, it was very colorful, but more we come towards 2020, more it becomes green. And what are those green risks or environmental risks? One is the climate change, extreme weather, disasters, biodiversity losses. So what does it say? That although we talk it as a natural event, sometimes maybe the climate change is an environmental issue, but these are also very strongly related to global risk landscape. And just remember that this is a report of the World Economic Forum, but they are emphasizing the importance of environmental risk. 2021 is the analysis of 2020, when we had already COVID-19, the first year of pandemic. And that time, of course, infectious disease became one of the strongest risks. But apart from that, these two types of risk, which is the digital power concentration and digital divide, these two things became quite prominent risk. We call this technological risk. And if you remember in 2020-21, at the initial phase, we have started online classes, we have started work from home, we have started ordering food from home, and all this delivery and all this thing. But we are possibly the fortunate group of people who had good digital connectivity, but not the whole world is equally connected digitally. We found a major gap or divide. We call the north-south divide, which is the developed country, developing countries divide. Even within the developing country, we saw the urban-rural divide. Urban schools are possibly more equipped with digital connectivity, but the rural schools are not. So when we had lockdown, the urban school possibly quickly could transfer to all these different types of digital divide, but the educational losses due to lockdown in the rural school in developing countries were huge actually. So we found this as one of the major potential risks. Even in Japan, and I'm sure in case of Korea also we have the same demographic conditions. If you go to the rural area, we will see many aging population or many aged people they are living there, maybe 85, 90-year-old, sometimes living alone, sometimes maybe with husband and wife. And if you say that all our health consultation will be with the mobile phone, it's very difficult for them to do that type of consultation. So even within developed country, I think this age barrier also caused a major digital divide. 2022, when we started all our like the processing of ordering food or buying online, so cyber security becomes one of the major risks. 2023, the energy crisis, because 2022 was the start of the Ukraine-Russia war, and for that, the energy crisis, food pricing, and so on became the major risk. So what I'm trying to point out here is that only within 4 years, we saw many new types of risk: infectious disease, digital divide, digital power concentration, cyber security, energy crisis, food pricing. Last year report, 2024, these two things, mis and disinformation and societal polarization, became one of the critical risk element. Because 2024 and 25 were the time when 60% of the world population went through election. And when we had election nowadays with all different types of AI-based tool, this mis and disinformations become one of the critical aspects, and it polarizes our society in different way. And we have seen it in past few years. But this is very interesting that this particular report was this 2024 January, 1st of January in Japan, we had a major earthquake and tsunami in the Noto Peninsula. And this particular diagram here, it shows the tweets after on January 1, 2, and 3, first 3 days. And what was those tweets and retweets? That this particular earthquake was an artificial earthquake due to a nuclear explosion in North Korea. And that is a sensational news. Of course, Japan and North Korea doesn't have a diplomatic relation. And then many people actually thought that this is a sensational news. They tweeted, retweeted. Some people knew that this is a fake news, but they intentionally actually tweeted this one or retweeted this one. So this mis and disinformation, and now many of you are possibly aware that X, or the new, like the Twitter, X, like which was the earlier Twitter, has the new business model that more your tweets or retweets get some number of likes, you are able to get some monetary compensation. So just think about 5 years back, 10 years back, we used to think earthquake as a natural disaster and natural event. But nowadays, it's not just that type of natural event anymore. It becomes so complex, and it becomes at that stage that time Japanese Prime Minister Kishida had to do a major press conference with one of my very good friend from Kyoto University, who is a seismologist, and who explained that this has nothing to do with the artificial earthquake or nuclear explosion. This was a pure tectonic movement. So this whole concept of this new technological risk are making our lives quite complicated. The risk landscape becomes quite complicated. So we need to keep it in mind when we talk about the future risk, and possibly this is the same thing. I understand that your center is more on the hazard literacy, not the risk literacy, but actually the hazard literacy, when you combine with other types of societal issues, it becomes the risk related issues, right? So I think that becomes quite critical. This is 2000. So when you see about this overall, in spite of all these colorful different types of other risks, but if it's all through like the civil society, international organizations, academia, government, private sector, so they did some survey, and to all of them, the future risk are quite interestingly the environmental risk, the climate change, climate extreme, then the biodiversity losses, or the natural hazards become major risk. And the interconnectivity also nowadays, we are talking about quite a bit on this systemic risk approach and the interlinkages of different types of risk. So 24 and 25 report, again quite similar, that when we talk about the short-term risk, within 2 years, next 2 years or 4 years, it is very colorful, like there are many different types of risks here. But if you look at little bit longer term risk of 10 years or so, or maybe 10 years beyond, usually we see the top 3 or 4 risks are mostly this environmental risk. So my main takeout from here is that yes, this whole risk landscape is changing. We don't know that what will the new risk will come. The geopolitical situation is changing quite drastically, and something possibly we don't have any control. But we need to address this longer term climate risk, environmental risk, while making lots of adjustment, and that's where I call our adaptive approaches, whether it is adaptive education, whether it is adaptive governance, whether it is adaptation in your daily lifestyle. I think we need to keep that in mind in future. Second context is this digital inclusivity, which I touched upon. So if you look at, of course, the internet user, Asia with the population, the largest internet user, but let me draw your attention here on the right hand side, where the internet users over last 10 years or 10-15 years, so it is increasing both, but you see that there is a gap between this urban and rural, which is around 20 to 25%, that is not decreasing. So it's a parallel growth. So how we can make it more inclusive, that's a major challenge. And for that, in Japan, again, the Kishida cabinet, the Prime Minister Kishida in 2022 launched this digital denentoshi, which is like the urban-rural connectivity, and try to make it more inclusive approach in the digital growth. I give you one specific example. I work in this particular prefecture called Kochi Prefecture, and this is in Shikoku Island. This particular prefecture is one of the very highly aging population, and it has least digital penetration, and it has one of the major risks in both seismic, like the earthquake and tsunami, as well as the typhoon and flood. There is a major scenario like the Japan, as you know, that quite prone to different types of earthquakes and tsunami, and we are expecting a major future earthquake and tsunami in this whole we call the Nankai Trough, this whole region, where the worst case scenario is that the 3 fault line will break simultaneously, and that will cause a tsunami of 36 meter, and I repeat, 36 meter is 12-story building. And the arrival time is 9 minutes. 9 minutes, 36 meter. So it's just virtually impossible to bring the people for the evacuation center. I have been working in this particular city and this prefecture from 2007, 2006 or 7, when I had a PhD student. And that time, I love telling this particular story, that one of the local community leader, he was showing us all the activities they have been doing. So they have been doing actually lots of this type of stairs, So like this, the high little bit of mountain, so the stairs, and then they make all this railing so that the old people can actually climb the stairs easily and all these things. So these are all community-based activity. And I remember that gentleman, his name was Nakamura-san, and he was showing me very enthusiastically, me and my student, that what are the work they have done. That was in 2007. And I asked him that what is the percentage of the aging population in your community? And he looked at me like this and he told sensei. Sensei in Japanese means professor. What are you asking? I am 75 and I am the youngest in my community. 2007, 75-year-old is the youngest in that particular community. I hope he is still alive, 18 years, so he will be 91. So yeah, so these are the remote communities and the major challenges are there. So earlier we used to have this type of tsunami evacuation tower, which are very inclusive, like even people are on the wheelchair, you can actually bring them. But now with this new scenario, with 9 minutes, you can't just bring the people to this high, to this. So what is the new type of tsunami evacuation shelter? The tunnel. You see, like this is the new one, and I worked with this particular city quite extensively. Sorry, I worked with this particular city extensively. So they are like, the main thing is that you just bring people in the tunnel and close the door of the tunnel, and then there is CCTV camera, so you can actually look at that. And this is the cross section of the tunnel. So here there are this tatami bed, the Japanese mat, and then water and food and some blanket, medicines and all these things. And at the end of the tunnel, there are the spiral things which actually brings you to up a little bit later. Now, whose responsibility is it to close the tunnel? And then they told that this is the head of the community leader, local community leader, not the mayor, not any government official. So, and I talked to him, and he told that they have done several evacuation drill, and every time there are some people who will be left behind. So, but for him, it's a very critical decision that he has to close the door, because some people have already evacuated, but maybe some of his friends are still outside. So it's a very, very complex situation, and the local government cannot say that what they need to do. So what we came out with after discussion with all the people, to establish the local rule. And what is that local rule? Is that whatever the situation is, you just come up to the door of your house. Someone will be there to pick you. Earlier, usually after a disaster, people used to go and knock someone's door, are you okay, your health is okay, and all those type of things. But now time is very limited, it's only 9 minutes. So you cannot waste time. So why I am telling this particular example is that communities are so diverse and it's so complex. So there is no one solution fits for all for an evacuation behavior. It has to be customized based on the local conditions, and the government is in no position to tell the people that you should be doing this. Rather, they need to decide based on the local conditions, local demographic situation, local topographic conditions, that what they will be doing. So this is my main learning from the field in this local condition. So with that context, let me go a little bit quickly with this the disaster risk. So I have been very fortunate to have several masters and PhD students, some with whom we did this type of work. One of my main learning is, for a better risk communication, the role of facilitator becomes extremely, extremely important. Okay, I can go to a community and show them some very good PowerPoint presentation. I go from outside, they will be very polite, they will be very nice, they will be smiling at you. But possibly, they will take me as an outsider. Yes, we have outside expertise, but we need to find the local leader or the local change agent through whom you try to make some changes in the local community. Who are those local facilitators? It again depends on situation. In Indonesia, I worked with the mosque leader Indonesia being an Islamic country, people believe very much on the leader of the mosque. And so we actually worked with them and then tried to provide them some information because people trust their mosque leader. In Vietnam, we worked with the Women's Association leader because in Vietnam being a very strong communist country, so they have this communist party system, and in every community, all the 18-year-old more than 18-year-old ladies, they become part of this communist, like the Women's Union. And they have quite strong Women's Union, and the leaders of the Women's Union become very, very influential to provide lots of information, especially health and sanitation related information during flood. Because ultimately when you have in the flood in the Mekong River Delta, so this water comes and it stays for almost 1 month, 1.5 months. So we call this living with flood. So there, one of the critical aspect is that how you take care of the health and sanitation issue of the small kids. And there, this mother's role become extremely important. And whom these mothers listen to is this woman's leader. So to me, one of the main risk communicator is this woman's leader. If you give them the proper information, that can actually bring it to widely to the community. So my main point here is this role of facilitator and the trust of them in the crucial, and it becomes very crucial for the risk communication. We did some survey in the high school kids in Japan in these few prefectures, and these few prefectures actually were affected by major earthquake and some other disasters as well. So we tried to use this particular model, like when ultimately one of our target of this whole education process is that how education is turned into action. Actions means preparedness. Actions means some actions before the disaster comes and some behavioral change during that particular disaster. So our argument was that this behavior change does not happen that easily. It's a process. It needs some knowledge, understanding that particular knowledge, deepening that knowledge, and with that school education, family education, community education, and self-education, it has 4 possibly different types of level of impact. So I won't go into the detail of that, but we did some analysis that which helps in which level, and we found that the school education is very important to provide the basic knowledge. Yes, it gives the hazard mechanism related information. It also gives what to do before, during, and after. And we found that the perceptions becomes very important thing. But from that perception to action, it needs more the family education, community education, and self-education. So it's possibly a combination of different types of activities, what you do in the school, what you do in your home, and what you do in the community. Possibly that combination becomes very, very important. This is my favorite slogan, like, tell me I will forget. I'm sure that what I'm saying, you will forget most of the things. Show me, I may remember. What some of the glimpses possibly remain. But the most important thing is the involve me, I will understand. So to me, when we talk about the disaster education, I've been doing this with different schools, school teachers, board of educations in Japan, in different other Asian countries. But I think one of the key important thing is this involvement. So experiential learning becomes one of the very, very critical aspect of the disaster education. This is after long discussions with our all accumulated small knowledge and experience. So we came out with this KIDA tree model, KIDA, knowledge, K for knowledge, I for interest, D for desire, and A for action. So again, it's not a prescriptive model. Depending on the situation of the school, depending on the situation of the community, you have possibly different level. So somewhere you start with knowledge, but somewhere possibly the students have already basic knowledge. Maybe you need to do some specific action to enhance their interest, or maybe they have already some interest and desire. So the important thing will be that last mile connectivity to make them making some very specific action. So we did it. So this was a work which we did with UN. That time it was UN ISDR. Now the name has changed, UN DRR. So then it has been, we call the 1, 2, 3 of disaster education. If you Google, you will be able to most probably download this English version. But then we have also translated this in several other UN languages and try to use it in different schools globally. So my main interest of doing this was, in Japan we used to do the disaster drill every year on 1st of September. 1st of September is the day of the earthquake of 1923. The Kanto earthquake, which was the largest earthquake so far in Japan, where we lost around 180,000 people. So that is the National Disaster Day. So even my son, he went to a normal elementary school and they used to do the drill. So drill once a year is very important, but what you do between one drill and the next year drill. And education is all about the process. It's not just one-time event. So my main interest of doing this type of thing was to make the students and teachers involved in different types of events all through the year. So some of the things can be done monthly, some of the things can be done quarterly, some maybe annually, and some are priority actions. And then we had these 3 specific category: home, community, and school. So we call this flood preparedness. This is just an example. Flood preparedness tree, level 1 and level 2. We prescribed some education, some specific process or some specific tools, but we have also left this lots of vacant place here. And that is, we encourage the teachers based on the local condition to customize their ways of extracurricular activity from their own experience, because ultimately all of us, we know that the student and the teachers know the nerve of the students the most, and they know that what attracts the students the most. I'm talking about mostly the elementary and junior high school education. Another example of this disaster education was this regional watching or the town watching. Many of you have also possibly done it. Like, it's a collective approach or collective ways of looking at the communities and your surroundings. So very similar to Japan and Korea has very similarity in the topography, that our river systems are very small. So anything happening in the upstream has a very significant impact on the downstream. Usually rivers both in Korea and Japan are around maybe 300 kilometers or so long. So the upstream downstream connectivity becomes very, very important. So our argument was, like, if we do some mountain watching, what is happening in the mountain, what are the changes happening? If we do some town watching in the plain area, and then if we do some coastal watching, what is happening in the coast, and somewhere if you connect that with some sort of process, so that possibly gives you some understanding about this regional watching. So we tried it in some of the cities in Japan, which has both mountain, plain area and coastal area. So some of the schools actually did the mountain watching, some did in the town, and some did in the coastal. But the important thing is that they need to share this experience together. And so these are some of, this is the name of the city, Saijo city, and these are some of the like major typhoon which actually affected the mountain, because the forest management was not that good. So there were lots of debris, and that actually affected the downstream. And that is why the connectivity of this the connectivity of the schools in the upland area, and then in the plain area, and then in the coastal area becomes very, very important. So the important part here is that the school and the teachers are, of course, they are there, but how we also involve the local government, how we involve the local community leader, that becomes also quite critical. So we did some very specific, this was also the same work with the UN. So we did some work, so this town watching handbook, and this is just to give the teachers and the Board of Education some idea like what to start with. Of course, it's an handbook, it's not an like you can always customize it based on the local condition, but I think our main learning was what I've written here, that town watching can be a very powerful tool, and where this community interaction and the nature based observations become very, very critical, and that gives lots of new ideas to the children to learn from the nature, one part, but also from the community, because the cultural part is not written anywhere. So why, say for example, people are not living? So there are lots of this local knowledge or indigenous knowledge which possibly can be extracted only you talk to the local community. So that interaction becomes very, very important. Another example is this. This is actually very related to possibly this hazard literacy. So understand these different types of hazard, and we did it in many countries, and we found that lots of the children, like these are the elementary kids, and they become very interested. Like we all understand the importance of the forest cover, and like it gives water inside, but when we have the concrete, so that infiltration becomes very, very bad. So we just use normal sponges here, and then try to give them the experiment. So you just put water, it's sponge, then you put a plastic sheet, which is the concrete, what we are seeing in the, so just try to make them understand that why the vegetation cover, even in an urban area, becomes very, very critical. Why, say for example, where we have the meandering, where the river is bending, that is one of the critical aspects when a critical area where there are overflow of the water. Why, where there is a confluence of river, those people possibly, say for example, where there is a confluence of river, these people possibly needs to evacuate in advance rather than other areas and so on. So we did this type of with the plastic pipe and all these things. So we just did a very simple thing to make them understand about the importance. Similarly, why the coastal green belt become important. Like these were some experiments with the mangroves in the tropical countries. So why mangroves becomes very, very important to save our lives, and we have seen that in many of the tsunami or storm surge or even in typhoon in many places. So my main learning again here is the small demonstration. These are very, very simple and small demonstration, but this can help students to understand the hazard mechanism, whether it is the meandering of the river, whether it is the two rivers coming together, or whether it is the forest cover or vegetation cover, whether it is the coastal protection or coastal zone management. Simplified way. We recently started, I am now a PhD student who is working very specifically on this virtual reality and augmented reality, and this is again possibly the new solutions what we are trying to understand. So with Tokyo city, there is a ward called Sumida ward, which is quite in the downtown in Tokyo. So what we are trying to work with them is that the children, they develop the evacuation path using this VR and XR, and then this evacuation path or evacuation ways are actually followed by the adult, like their parents and the local communities. So it is more like a bottom-up approach. Usually in Japan, I'm not sure in Korea, but usually in Japan what we do is that when we do an evacuation behavior or when we do an evacuation drill, it is more controlled or more directed by the local government. But here what we wanted to change it more from the student perspective, so, or the children's perspective, using this VR XR, and we found it, and then we try to use some indicators that what actually, when we talk about the immersive learning, so what are the key elements of this immersive learning? And possibly, again, this is a new tool, and possibly in future it will be quite essential element for that. So from disasters, let me go a little bit to the climate education. And when you talk about the environment and climate education, all of us, we know that now we talk about environment, climate, but it has always been there. And this real environmental actions always starts at the local level. And these three or four bullet points on the right hand side, which talks about this is core of the community, respect and belief for the opinion, evidence, and this tolerance. I think that becomes one of the critical aspect of this type of environmental education. Again, long back we did some work. This is called kids means small kid. ISO, many of you may know that the International Standard Organization. So there is this environmental ISO, which is 14,000. Many of the companies actually, they do the ISO. So what we try to do is the kids version of that ISO. And this was with United Nations University. This is United Nations University, UNEP, UNESCO, and ISO together. So the main target was, like, when you talk about climate change, environmental change, we always tell that, oh, okay, this is government and negotiations and then companies and big emitters and so on. But our main argument was that can we, each and every citizen, can we be a little bit responsive citizen to make, even if it is a small little effort, by reducing our carbon footprint individually. So this particular, this is a set of diary type of thing. So it is like an environmental diary for the children. So they will make their, like first they will make their house. So maybe 3 bedroom or 1 kitchen, 1 dining area and all this thing. So then they will keep also, like, maybe there are 2 kids, husband and father and mother, so the number of families and so on. So then they will start measuring that what time they are putting on the light, what time they are putting off the light, and how many minutes are you taking shower, how many pack of the waste you are putting every day. So these are every day, actually they will be going that one. And for so these are like for different levels. So level 1, 2, 3, so the one will go for 6 months, one for 12 months or something like that. And the main important part is that we make a very simple calculation based on that particular their own diary, that with your own effort you have reduced this much of carbon emission. So we give them this certification of the primary level of kids ISOs, and this becomes the children becomes very motivated with that. They can see a direct link about his or her own action with what we call about the climate change. Whenever we say climate change, we look at the sky, but it's our own activity, it's our own footprint which actually makes the climate change. Now, a modified version, I have actually another PhD student who is now working on this 1.5 degree lifestyle change. Some of you might have heard this 1.5 degree, which was agreed in Paris in the climate change negotiation conference in 2015, that we try to reduce our carbon emission so that the overall temperature, global temperature, does not exceed 1.5 degree. But now we all understand that it is going to exceed already. But at least can we do something to think about our lifestyle change so that we can at least achieve certain aspects of this 1.5 degree. So again, these are like very, very small thing, but our main target was this education leading to this lifestyle change and the behavior, and also a little bit of attitude, that is whose responsibility is that. We cannot just keep on blaming the government or the developed country and like all those type of political negotiations which usually happen in the climate change international conferences, but at least to be a little bit of change in the mindset to be a more responsible citizen. In Japan, this eco school also became very popular, like where you retrofit your the whole school building with different types of electrical appliances, like the low energy bulbs, then solar panel, then water circulation, then rainwater harvesting, and so on. So, but these are we call the eco retrofitting of the houses of the schools. But the important part of it, and that is more attractive thing for me, is like there the community becomes very, very involved. So when we have this type of eco school retrofitting, the community, they come. So then the local government actually explain them that why we are doing this one, and what is the cost effectiveness. Because ultimately, if it has to be, if I learn something from the nearby school, and if I want to do it in my home, that is, of course, I will think that whether it is cost effective or not, how much money I have to pay. So this is very much related, not just in the school, but school and the nearest community, again changing a little bit on the behavioral pattern and some sort of environmental or the electrical appliances which are related to different types of climate related issues. And the final part is this little bit on the sustainable development. Again, many of you are possibly also working on the ESD, Education for Sustainable Development. And to me, one of the key aspects of ESD is these three things: that learning to know, when we know what it is, but then learning to do, this is the action part of it. But more than the action is this learning to be, which is the dignity part of it. Because ultimately, how we internalize all the issues, that possibly gives us the behavioral pattern, like how I will behave, how I will think. And that thinking, from a very early stage of even at the kindergarten, now in Japan, this ESD education is even in the kindergarten. Some small behavioral change, because of course they don't know what is sustainable development and all these things, but give them some small thing. So I think from this very early childhood, if we can have this know part, do part, and then in a longer term, this learning to be becomes actually very, very important. And that's, to me, the key essence of this ESD. So we call, like, now, okay, SDGs until 2030, but I think this sustainable development, whatever framework comes in future, but to me, I think these three things possibly does not change, and this is a very, very important value education which is required. Again, from long back, we have been doing this one in western part of Japan. This is a city called Nishinomiya, where we worked with these different types of eco activity. But here, this legacy teller roles is very important, like to know about the past environment from the older generation. So what they do is that they will bring the children to the nearby park or the river, and then they will tell that maybe 30-40 years back we used to find this type of fishes, or we used to find this type of flower. So that environmental legacy, now it is lots of changes happening, but this environmental legacy from the past, like the elder generation, how you actually transfer it to the younger generation or the future generation, that becomes also very, very important pillar of this type of sustainable development. Another city in Kesennuma, which was hit by major earthquake and tsunami in 2011, and this was very interesting that they did not do the disaster education. They were doing the ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, but Education for Sustainable Development has a very strong community linkage. Whatever activities they have been doing, they are working with the local communities and so on. So, but the impact was that none of the children were affected, or nobody died, no child actually died in this particular city because of this very, very strong connection with the communities and so on. So after the 2011 East Japan earthquake and tsunami, we did some project with the Ministry of Education, and we tried to understand many different cities' roles, the Board of Education's role, but whether you do it as a disaster education, whether you do it as a part of the ESD, whether you do it as a part of the environmental education, the commonality is always the school community linkage. Wherever we found a very strong school community linkage, I think the students' lives could be saved very easily. Yeah. So little bit at the last, the postscript. So in Japan, actually over years, over different types of disasters. I talked about this 1923 Kanto earthquake that was on September 1. But I think every time we have a major disasters, we learn from that particular disasters, and we call the DRR, disaster risk reduction 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0. 1.0 is something after the Ise-1 typhoon 1959, when we had our disaster law early warning system. 2.0 was Hanshin-Awaji earthquake or the Kobe earthquake, where we found that in spite of very strong sort of technical team, but 98% people were saved by the family and the local community. So there are these three types of help: self-help, mutual help, and public help becomes very, very important. 2011, when we had the tsunami, so that is the DRR 3.0. So then we started this national resilience planning, and there have been strong investment on this. Then this network help became quite important apart from these three types of help. And then in 2015, when we had all the different types of frameworks like Sendai, SDG, Paris Agreement, I think this technology became very, very important. And there we started talking about the Society 5.0. So now we have these three specific level, specific framework. One is Society 5.0, I will come back to that. National Resilience Planning and SDG Future City. But the common issue is, like, we need the localization, like we need to bring it. The national government only provide the framework, funding, policy direction, but it is the localizations which matters. And as a part of the Society 5.0, so just want to explain a little bit about that. Like, why we say 5.0 is because 1.0 was the hunting age, when our ancestor used to do hunting. 2.0 is the agriculture, 3.0 is the industry, and 4.0 is the current era where the information becomes very critical. But 5.0 is the futuristic society where we are going, where it's a technology driven, because very similar to Korea, Japan is going depopulation, aging population. So we need, our human resources are going low. So we need to trust on the technology. But the more important thing is that it's a technology driven but human-centric society. How we bring this human as the core part of this particular concept. So this comfort, vitality, and high-quality lives. And we did a couple of books on this, Society 5.0, digital transformation. But again, our main challenge, as I mentioned earlier, that digital transformation is one thing, but digital inclusivity, to bring, like, no one should be left behind, that particular slogan, how we do that with the technology and the society interface, I think that's a very, very important challenge. Let me just tell you a couple of points here that, okay, not this one. Okay, this Noto Peninsula earthquake, which I was mentioning, that this was, this was happened on 1st of January, and almost 504 people died. So I have been now working in Noto and with some of the local communities, local people. There are some damages, I'm not going into that, but three things were very important, but one of the critical aspect of this evacuation drill. So this is the local community leader who has been practicing evacuation drill 4 times a year. Every year 4 times. So I actually interviewed him, and then we did a program with NHK, which is the national TV, and he told that this house was just, this was his house, and which is just only 20 meters from the sea. So after the earthquake, within I think 5 or 7 minutes, he found the water is coming, and then he had one neighbor, and there one of the neighbor was around mid-50s, but she was disabled, like the physically challenged, so she cannot walk. So immediately what he did is that he just went to their home and put that lady on the back, and then climbed around 100 stairs to reach on the evacuation place. So when I asked him, he told that I had absolutely no confusion. I didn't need to check any manual or any guideline because this has been so internalized. So my main lesson here is that this evacuation drill becomes extremely important, and nowadays we are trying to promote in different types of evacuation drill in Japan, not only just on the daytime, the nighttime evacuation becomes very critical because of this aging population. And when you do a nighttime evacuation drill and the daytime evacuation drill, you really see the differences, the challenges and all these things. So that becomes quite critical. Yes, so these are possibly the summary of the talk. The education is passive and learning is active, and I strongly believe in that, especially when it comes to the disaster education. And that possibly goes back to what I mentioned: knowledge, interest, desire, action. So importance of the school, yes, it's important to give the knowledge, but to turn into action, I think we need more experiential, more participatory, more involvement. The value education is extremely important, and this is learning to be, experiential learning, school community interactions. Of course, curriculum education is extremely important because it gives an uniformity all over the country. But then for disaster related things, I think extracurricular activity also becomes very important because each of the area has different types of hazard, and based on that, teachers are possibly in a better position to discuss and decide. School community family linkage. So this is, I love showing this particular photo. This is from a small village in Japan called Shirakawa-go, which is an UNESCO heritage site. And nowadays I've been actually trying to preach for this one, from community based to compassion based. I think, yes, community based is very important, but ultimately it's the human compassion which is very important during the disasters. And I personally have seen in many disaster situations, and this is irrespective of country, actually. This is irrespective of governance system, irrespective of the religion, irrespective of the size of the country. So how we actually have that compassion embedded into the disaster risk reduction activity. I don't have a very specific answer to that. Again, it depends from country to country, from culture to culture. So with that, I think that's end my presentation. Thank you very much.